The resemblance was undeniable. Across the conference table, CEO Eliza Morgan stared at the photo on Marcus Wright's desk, a smiling 7-year-old girl with the same distinctive hazel eyes and dimpled smile that Eliza saw in her own mirror every morning. The blood drained from her face as pieces of a puzzle she never knew existed began falling into place. "Why does your daughter look like me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible in the suddenly silent office. If you're captivated by this moment, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that explore the unexpected connections that change lives forever. This journey of discovery, secrets, and redemption will touch your heart in ways you never expected. Marcus Wright had always been good at keeping secrets. As the head of IT at Horizon Innovations, he'd built a reputation for reliability and discretion. His colleagues respected him, his team admired him, and his 7-year-old daughter Lily adored him. To the outside world, he was simply a dedicated single father who had raised his daughter alone since her birth. What no one knew, what he had carefully concealed for 7 years, was the truth about Lily's mother. Every morning followed the same routine. Marcus would wake at 5:30, prepare Lily's lunch, lay out her clothes, and then gently wake her with a kiss on the forehead. "Rise and shine, Starlight," he'd say, using the nickname he'd given her the day she was born. Lily would groan dramatically before bouncing out of bed with the inexhaustible energy only children possess. "Dad, is my science project good enough for the fair?" Lily asked that fateful Tuesday morning, her hazel eyes, so like her mother's, wide with concern as she spooned cereal into her mouth. "It's brilliant, Starlight. You've worked so hard on it." Marcus smiled, pushing away the familiar pang of guilt. Lily was growing more like her mother every day, not just in appearance, but in her fierce intelligence and determination. Sometimes it physically hurt to look at her. "Ms. Peterson says the new CEO is visiting our school for the science fair. She's supposed to be super smart and important." Lily's voice was filled with the kind of awe reserved for superheroes and astronauts. Marcus froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. "The CEO of Horizon?" "Yeah. Ms. Peterson says she used to be a scientist before she became a boss. Isn't that cool?" The cereal turned to ash in Marcus's mouth. Eliza Morgan had been appointed CEO of Horizon Innovations 6 months ago, but their paths hadn't crossed. He'd made sure of that, volunteering for remote projects and avoiding company-wide meetings. But a school science fair? There would be no avoiding her there. "Dad, are you okay? You look weird." Marcus forced a smile. "Just thinking about work, Starlight. Finish up or we'll be late." As he drove Lily to school, his mind raced through contingency plans. Maybe he could call in sick on the day of the science fair. Maybe Eliza wouldn't attend after all. CEOs were busy people. Maybe after 7 years she wouldn't recognize him. But deep down, Marcus knew his carefully constructed life was about to unravel. Eliza Morgan straightened her blazer as she walked through the elementary school hallway, flanked by her assistant and the school principal. At 36, she had achieved what most people only dreamed of: a PhD in biochemistry, multiple patents to her name, and now the CEO position at one of the country's leading biotech firms. On paper, her life was perfect. "We're so honored to have you judge our science fair, Dr. Morgan," the principal gushed. "Many of our students aspire to careers in science, and having someone of your caliber here is truly inspirational." Eliza smiled politely, though her mind was elsewhere. She'd agreed to this event as part of Horizon's community outreach program, but today had been particularly challenging. The board was pressuring her about quarterly projections, and she'd had another failed follow-up with her fertility specialist that morning. "The children have been preparing for weeks," the principal continued. "Some of them are quite brilliant. I look forward to seeing their work," Eliza replied automatically. They entered the gymnasium, now transformed into a showcase of poster boards, dioramas, and experimental setups. Children stood nervously beside their projects. Parents hovered nearby with cameras ready. It was chaotic and colorful and alive in a way that made Eliza's chest tighten. With an emotion she couldn't quite name, she moved methodically from project to project, asking questions and offering encouragement. The children's enthusiasm was infectious, and despite her earlier distraction, Eliza found herself genuinely engaged. "And here we have one of our brightest students," the principal announced, leading her to a display about bioluminescent algae. "Lily Wright and her father have created quite the impressive demonstration." Eliza looked down at the small girl with hazel eyes and a serious expression, then up at her father, and the world stopped spinning. Marcus Wright, The man she hadn't seen in 8 years. The man who had disappeared without a trace after their brief but intense relationship. He looked older, a few strands of gray at his temples, but unmistakably the same. Their eyes met, and in that moment Eliza knew he had recognized her too. His face had gone pale, his body rigid. "Dr. Morgan, this is Lily Wright and her father, Marcus Wright," the principal introduced, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. "Hello," Eliza managed, her professional mask slipping into place even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Tell me about your project, Lily." The girl launched into an explanation, her small hands gesturing enthusiastically as she described how she had cultured the algae and what conditions made them glow brightest. Eliza nodded and asked appropriate questions, but her mind was reeling. There was something about this child, something in the shape of her face, the cadence of her speech, the analytical way she approached her explanation. "That's very impressive work, especially for someone your age," Eliza said when Lily finished. "You have a natural scientific mind," Lily beamed. "My dad says I get that from my mom. She was a scientist too." Eliza's eyes snapped to Marcus, who looked like he might be sick. "Is that so?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I never met her," Lily continued, "but Dad tells me stories about how smart she was. He says I have her eyes." The gymnasium suddenly felt too small, too hot. Eliza excused herself, walking briskly toward the exit, needing air, needing space to process the impossible thought forming in her mind. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that Marcus had followed. "Eliza, wait," he called once they were in the empty hallway. She turned, fury and confusion warring within her. "How old is she, Marcus?" He swallowed hard. Seven. Eliza repeated the number, doing the math. "And her mother was a scientist?" Marcus looked at the floor, then back at her, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "You need to understand what? That you have a daughter who looks exactly like me? A daughter who would have been conceived right before you vanished from my life without a word?" Her voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "Is she mine, Marcus? Is Lily my daughter?" The silence that followed was answer enough. 3 days later, Marcus sat in his office at Horizon Innovations, a framed photo of Lily on his desk, waiting for the meeting that would determine the course of the rest of his life. He'd known this day might come when he accepted the job at Horizon 2 years ago, but he'd convinced himself the risk was worth it for the salary and benefits that would give Lily the life she deserved. Now, as he waited for Eliza to arrive, he wondered if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, second only to the decision he'd made 7 years ago. The door opened and Eliza entered, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her face unreadable. She closed the door behind her and took the seat across from him. "I've had a DNA test done," she said without preamble. "I had my doctor rush it. The results came back this morning." Marcus nodded. He'd expected as much. "She's mine." Eliza's voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Lily is biologically my daughter." "Yes. How?" The single word contained a universe of questions. Marcus took a deep breath. "Do you remember the research you were doing before you left academia? On ovarian tissue cryopreservation?" Eliza's eyes widened. "That was experimental work. We were developing protocols for cancer patients to preserve fertility before chemotherapy. You were passionate about it. You talked about it all the time, how it could give women choices, how it could change lives." Marcus's voice was soft with the memory. "You had your own tissue preserved as part of the research validation. That was supposed to be destroyed when I left the program," Eliza whispered. "It wasn't when you ended things between us." "When I ended things?" Eliza interrupted, incredulous. "You disappeared, Marcus. I came home one day and all your things were gone." No note, no call, nothing." Marcus looked genuinely confused. "That's not what happened. You told me you were taking the corporate job, that you couldn't balance a relationship with your career trajectory. You said it would be easier if we made a clean break." "I never said that. I told you about the job offer, yes, but I wanted to discuss it with you. I came home planning to talk about how we could make it work and you were gone." They stared at each other. 7 years of misunderstanding stretching between